Well, a recent YouGov poll for the Bible Society found that over 60% of children have never read, heard or seen popular Bible stories like the feeding of the 5,000, the Good Samaritan or Daniel in the lion's den. Yet the same survey also found that many parents think Bible stories illustrate good values that children should learn. Are Bible stories the way to teach morality? Well, Luke, from the Christadelphians, good morning again.
Good morning.
You teach children, for example, the story of Noah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If you're teaching the story of Noah, do you teach them the bit about God deciding to wipe everybody off the face of the earth, men, women and children, because they've been wicked, but saving Noah? Do you teach them that bit?
We teach them everything. We teach them the whole Bible. We take the whole every part of the Bible.
It's a bit, indiscriminate, God killing everybody. If, say, one of the children said, but that's a bit cruel, all babies and children, women and men being killed because some of them had been wicked, what would you say to them?
Well, when people say that, what they forget...
People do say that.
Yeah, they do that. When they say that, what they forget is God warned those people for 120 years, and that's there in there. And he warned them again and again and again, and he told them that's what's going to happen. And
they didn't
ignored,
listen.
They didn't listen. And finally, when it happened,
everyone
it's
was being
regrettable. It is really regrettable. God didn't want it to happen. God doesn't want anyone to die, but he'd warned them for 120 years, and when it did happen, then unfortunately it was on their own head.
Well, would you teach them that the ark had every single animal on earth? Yeah?
Yes, we would.
Kangaroos?
We take the Bible absolutely
Polar bears,
literally.
Penguins?
Absolutely.
From the Antarctic?
Yeah, we take the Bible literally.
Yeah. After the Sermon on the Mount, of course, is a lot of people would say that's the other side of it. It's a remarkable and beautiful, the Sermon on the Mount. Show us your puppets.
OK.
Because you go into the...
this is one of the puppets we use.
If you've got puppets of any other prophets, could you kindly not show them?
This is one of the puppets we use.
Yeah, go on.
We use them for two things mainly. We use them for public preaching.
Yeah.
So out in the centre of Peterborough, some of the people here from Peterborough may have seen us in the centre of
Anyone
Peterborough.
seen?
And we've also used them in our Sunday schools as well. Yeah. I teach Sunday school on a regular basis. I have done for the 20 years or so. And I absolutely know from my own personal experience, not just from teaching Sunday school, but from myself, the morals in the Bible are absolutely fundamental to me, to who I am, to how I act. And I've seen it in children as well that I teach in Sunday school, from the ones 20 years ago and the ones I was teaching last Sunday. We use the Bible, we base everything we believe on the Bible, and there is fantastic stories in the But not just stories, historical accounts.
The puppet, yeah? How does it work? You put your hand in it?
I'm really hoping you wouldn't do this to me. But,
have you got a ventriloquist act as well?
No, I haven't. And normally I'm in the background and I leave the puppeteers to other people.
So the children love it?
So, the children absolutely love it.
There we go.
Absolutely love it.
Yes. Andrew, these are great stories. These are wonderful stories, aren't they?
Some of them are. I mean, the bigger question, obviously, is about stories and morality, and stories are a really important way to encourage moral development. They do things that other sorts of moral instruction can't do. They add warmth and colour and lessons and engage children.
Yeah.
And we're lucky, right now, to have access to millions of amazing stories. Stories with incredible characters, stories with incredible lessons, rich and deep in the way that I've just described. Children's stories like J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter stories by Philip Pullman.
Is Harry Potter better than the Bible?
Harry Potter is a wonderful example of people behaving bravely, even though they're scared, of people being honest, of people being kind, of people cooperating, of people doing the sort of things that we want them to do, of people combining against evil in the world, And I think that stories like that, or the stories of Philip Pullman or Terry Pratchett that I've mentioned, are a really good way to encourage children to think about moral issues and to become better people and to want to be better people because they see those sort of examples in stories. I think in comparison, the stories in the Bible are not good enough to be morally instructive tales. Because I think that for lots of reasons. I think
Which one's not good enough?
Well, I mean...
What about the stuff about Noah warning people?
Well, you put your finger on the fact that there is, of course, a lot of nasty violence, destruction and immorality in the Bible, like, for example, wiping out the entire population of the earth because they're not doing what you tell them to. But also a lot of other very superficial stories I mean, even stories that might be useful as a one-off lesson, and I don't say they're entirely useless, stories like The Good Samaritan, for example, is a good example of someone reaching out across a cultural boundary to help someone. But it needs a lot of explaining. It's not something that children engage with straight away like they do with some richer modern fiction that they can get into, immediately, stories of adventure and the sort of stories that I was talking about already.
Well, you've got the puppets, for example. And you've got...
Well, exactly. And the fact that you need the puppets to make the story useful is an indication it's not a very good story.
Wait a minute.
You said... Sorry, go on, Christine.
Sorry, no, you go on.
Sorry?
No.
Christine, in a minute.
It doesn't need explaining. A man was lying beaten, robbed on the floor, and a complete stranger came along and showed him compassion. And you say
that's a good story. I say that's a good story. I think
it's wonderful.
It's a nice moment. It's a nice moment.
Adi,
a bigger story is better.
I knew Adi would be back.
We don't need to go any far than where we are here.
Yeah.
My grandfather lived to 120 years.
Wow.
And in Africa, and he was the one that had these Bible stories. And you have to be proud about this in Great Britain.
Yeah.
It was your missionaries that brought these stories of Jesus explaining humanity and divinity with humanity. And he was saved from that. Pass it on to my father, to me, and now my children.
Do we get, and Christina, in a minute, I promise, do we get our morals from the Bible?
Of course we do.
Where did the ancient Greeks, the ancient Phoenicians, and the Aboriginals who went to Australia 50,000 years ago, where did they get their morals?
The Bible talks to you about human beings. Every one of those are human beings created by God.
Where did they get their morals?
No, everyone is human being created by God. In us, is innate in us, goodness.
Okay.
And as we live our lives daily and we communicate with different people, you mentioned something now. The moment we make decisions in our lives, we live with the consequences. Whatever those consequences.
So it's not from the Bible, it's innate.
But the Bible speaks about us, God creating us.
So
it's still the Bible story.
So the Bible codifies it.
The Bible created us as people and then gives us a guidance of how to live our lives. And that is fantastic for any generation.
But millions and millions of people lived before the Bible.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah.
Well,
I'm not talking about the Bible before people. I'm saying, yes, I'm talking about God was before the Bible. And God created people.
Right.
Yes, I mean, the point I would make is that Adi has just said innate goodness. I would say we're made in the image of God. In us is innate godness. Yeah. And we can choose to follow that or not follow it. I love the stories. You were talking about Harry Potter, etc. But the stories in the Bible are absolutely brilliant for teaching morality. Think of the prodigal son. He goes off, he makes a mess of his life, he comes back. The moral of the story is, when you've blown it, say you're sorry, and God is a God of forgiveness. You can start again.
Wonderful.
But it has to be retold in every single generation. And the problem I would have with keeping it only in first century is that is so remote. Children cannot understand that. The stories have to be completely retold, redressed, reconfigured for each generation. But the Bible is filled with such incredible truth. But,
Let me ask you one, actually. There's another story here that did occur to me, which is that of the... what merit is there in the story of Abraham being on the brink of sacrificing his son because God told him to sacrifice his son? Now, these days, it's a job for social services, isn't it?
Yes, that would take...
What is the merit in that? He didn't ultimately go through with it because God... what's the merit in it?
The merit is all about a person's relationship to God. It's about who do you put first in your life. Now, we would have to really tell that story differently because that would be totally unacceptable now. It has to be retold because no parent these days would ever get that far as almost to plunge a knife to sacrifice their child.
Do you think Abraham did get that far?
It's a story, Nick. It's a story.
It's not. It's a historical account.
What? It's a historical account.
But no, it speaks of truth. It isn't, did that happen? I don't think so. It talks about radical obedience to God.
But that's not a good moral.
If you start dismissing parts of the Bible, then you can dismiss...
being just stories.
We all do pick and mix. Of course he doesn't take the Bible literally.
The Bible stands as a complete book.
Historical?
No, it's not a book. It's a library.
And absolutely fundamentally moral.
Right, fundamentally. Graham?
Yeah, I think it's extraordinary that Christians seem to think they invented morality. I mean, you've
We
mentioned
don't.
it.
We don't.
As you mentioned before.
Andy's explained it. It's innate.
Yeah, well, I think for once I can agree with him on
The
that.
higher cognitive
But
species
I
have
think
morality, not just
the
us.
reason
but
why,
yeah.
so if you look at some examples, if you look at, for example, a bird feeding its young, you don't think at the expense of its own hunger. You don't actually think of that as being moral. If you look at, conversely, if you look at a fish which gives 10,000 eggs, all of which drift off,
Okay.
that's not a bad parent.
Okay, but what about the stories let's get back to the stories in the Bible. The stories in the Bible.
Well,
What's your favourite?
Who created the birds?
I think the Bible is
The
an
dinosaurs.
interesting document because it's part of the social fabric of Great Britain. But I think in terms of offering any moral guidance, I think it's pretty much zero.
Zero?
Oh, not at
Because
all.
I think,
Zero?
Because I think
The Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah.
Do unto others?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
But-
do unto others is the golden thread that runs through all
Yeah.
the great religions of all time. Of
But you
course,
don't
Christians didn't
you
invent
don't
morality.
need religion to be good.
No, of
Religion
course
is
you don't. Of
morality.
course you don't.
Morality. There's a reason why morality has evolved. It's partly because human beings
believe in any morality at all?
human beings take so long to develop in the womb. 9 months.
Yes.
The human brain is, we're told, the most complex thing known to man. Children or youngsters take 15 years to develop. So parents have to devote a huge amount of their life to their children. So that is the crucible in which morality evolves. It's inevitable, otherwise they wouldn't survive.
Okay, and Leslie, here's here from the